shamefully dishonest. And apparently we got a caller backstage. So caller number one, welcome to Adam versus the Man. Who do we have, Jim? Do I have to vamp until they actually appear on stage?
Sorry, no, technically they're backstage, but there they go. Okay, they were reconnecting. Sorry for the delay.
All right. Caller number one, welcome to Adam versus the Man.
Hello? Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, what's up, Adam? How you doing?
Excuse me for presuming your gender from the sound of your voice. I'm great. How are you?
Oh, I'm he, him, he, they works. Either one. How are you doing this morning?
I do make a genuine effort to not presume gender, just out of courtesy, regardless of everything else. But you're
good for you.
If that was a woman's voice, I'd be suspect. So what's on your mind, caller?
Well, I mean, you had me on here. I guess the first thing I wanted to do was, hey, I'm sorry for being mean on Twitter. You know, Twitter brings out the worst in people. I called you. Can I curse on here?
Of course.
Okay, I said like fuck. I called you a fucking idiot and stuff. That was me. But that's Twitter. You know, now that we're having voice to voice, it's not gonna be like that. You know, you're an actual person in front of me, so it's different.
And I still invited you on the show, but I would point out, even on Twitter, I'm a real person, and a lot of accounts are not. But
true,
you are, or at least appear to be.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you never know.
But you wanted to raise a critique, as I recall, of my analysis of the COVID mythology. So hit me.
I mean, I guess so our conversation was specifically about trusting data and trusting studies, and the issue you raised specifically was that you didn't trust government data and like government studies, right? That was the main thing that you raised.
I mean, it's not. This is, you know, and this is an important distinction. I'll take the chance to make here. Government is saying so many things that it makes sense for them to tell the truth 99% of the time and then lie that critical 1% of the time when it matters. You know, when government says 40,000 Americans die on government roads every year, you know, I mean, I believe that. When they say we're using drones to bomb innocent people in other countries, well, yeah, I believe that. You know, when they say they're spending trillions of dollars on wasteful government programs, yeah, I believe that. But when they lie and say, oh, and we have the best interest of your health at mind, and we're just and righteous and legitimate, and now we're telling the truth, and now it's really important that you submit and obey, pretty sure that's when we have to be suspicious. And there's a lot of lies in that vein around the statistics. And I think just in broad strokes, the overcounting of the death toll from COVID and the underreporting of the vaccine side effects.
Okay, so I guess the issue I have with that is that, so, I mean, I agree that the government can do a lot of horrendous things and they can lie to you, of course. I mean, personally, I identify myself as a libertarian leftist or an anarcho-communist, libertarian socialist. I don't like using the term socialist communist because people get a little freaked the fuck out when you use terms like that. But I'm with you on that.
Because I love talking to ANCOMs.
Sure.
And people who have distinct strains of anarchism, because I think that my message on that can be very unifying. That if you're an anarcho-communist and you believe in the non-aggression principle as a libertarian, but you think that if we apply it, we're going to achieve your vision of anarcho-communism, I would say, please drop the adjective. Let's all who believe in this ethical standard of voluntarism work together. Are you a voluntarist?
Well, so I guess the issue I have with that, though, is that I think the communism part is very important, because I think one of the most, if you want to maximize people's freedoms, which is what I care about maximizing freedom. If you want to do that, you got to get rid of capitalism, guys. I'm sorry, capitalism, it's not doing it. It's not going to give us freedom. Capitalism? It's not going to get rid of hierarchy.
Hold on a second. Now here I have major issue with what you just said.
Well, yeah, I figured you would.
And this is actually acknowledging that you may have a completely different definition of capitalism, and that's fine. But if you say we got to get rid of it, if you're talking about what we have now is capitalism and we want to get rid of it, I completely fucking agree with you. And we're having a definitional argument, which is really dumb. Okay.
Well, I mean, I have a problem with capital ownership of the means of production, and I have a problem with. I mean, I don't have as big of a problem with markets. I like market socialism. I think that could be like a good step to getting us there. But markets are also pretty cringe.
Do you own yourself? Do you want to own your body and own yourself? Do you want a world where that is respected?
Yeah, of course.
That is the ultimate means of production. The individual human being, your mind, your brain, and without the freedom, that is
sure. But
it seems like this what definition of the means of production again is something that has been taken by mainstream economic manipulators and propagandists to trick people into saying that this is illegitimate. Now, I completely agree with you in the sentiment. I might be assuming here that the current concept of the means of production of corporations and factories is completely fucked up because it's corporatist. And that in a voluntary society, ownership of that would be much more distributed, but you don't have to give up the concept of ownership of the means of production because that's inherently tied to self-ownership.
Well, so, I mean, I guess, yeah, I guess I would agree that like self-ownership plays a role in that, of course. Like, so the guy you had on before, he was talking about living in a self-sufficient way. That to me is totally in line with like left-wing values, being able to live self-sufficiently, and you're creating things for yourself. You're doing the labor. You reap the full value of your labor. That is owning the means of production. That's one way that someone could own the means of production. But what I'm also talking about more broadly would be, hey, if you work for a factory, that's also your fucking factory. That's worker ownership of the means of production for me. I mean, I have to say another thing. What I have to say another thing, please. I have to say another thing. I reject the idea that there's some like distinction between capitalism and like crony capitalism and corporatism. It's all part of the same thing. They all stem from the same fundamental issues with capitalism.
I mean, because to me, it sounds like you are a capitalist. If you believe in self-ownership, you believe you get to keep the product of your labor.
But that's not capitalism. Under capitalism, by definition, you don't keep the products of your labor.
No. So what is your definition of capitalism?
My definition of capitalism, well, I kind of explained this. It would be generally a market-based system where capital owns the means of production. That's like just a very quick, like one sentence definition. But
so that's fine that you have that definition, but it's not the definition that I'm using, and it's not.
Okay. Well, we have to have the same definition, and my definition is in line with academics and.
Absolutely. And this is a big part. And so I want to point out that this is a big problem with how we are divided. I mean, if you're an anarchist and I'm a libertarian voluntarist, we really should be working together on a lot of issues. We should be working together to a voluntary society and then see, whose preferences, have the most effect in the marketplace of ideas. Once we get rid of this idea of war and militarism and centralized coercion of government that, violates self-ownership in some really obvious ways. But it sounds like you would be against taxing individual income. So the textbook
well, I mean, while we have a state, sorry,
let me bring it back, and then we'll get past this and get back to the statistics and COVID. But the dictionary definition of capitalism is generally a lot closer to an economic system based on ownership of the means of production. And if you define means of production the way that the authorities want you to, they're going to say corporations, factories. When I think of what does means of production actually mean, it's what creates value. It's not, and those things are all secondary to individual self-ownership. And if you have a system that respects that, everything flows from that. So in a sense, I would say that by my definition, you're a capitalist. You just believe that there needs to be some, hey, come on, man, my definition. But I'm actually looking at the dictionary. And if you look at, let's see, the first thing on Google, an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. See, you're talking, you don't want the state to control this. You want distributed worker ownership of that in what you describe as anarcho-communism.
So, but
right?
the key word there is private ownership. If it's private ownership, then the ownership is done for the production of capital by a capital class. That's what private ownership means.
How is that different from you as a self-sufficient worker growing food and keeping and
Because
eating your own food?
that food isn't capital.
Why not?
Because
I eat it, and my means of production is sustained.
Because you're not using it to hire
because
you're not using it to hire out other people so that they can produce more capital for you to like extract profit.
Oh, so I'm not allowed to feed a stranger who wanders onto my property.
That's not what that is.
Work and help me tend my farm.
Well, then if you're like, hold on, if you're like holding like a starving person essentially like hostage for food, or like to give them food in exchange for labor, that's kind of coercive, is it not? Do I have to take you to Coconut Island, my friend?
Oh, right. If I go to the island and steal. No, so I do have a solution to the Coconut Island challenge, as is often raised by
wait, I'm actually curious. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, so so correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding of the Coconut Island challenge is that two people wash up on a desert island and one of them collects all the coconuts and then demands that the other one work for the coconuts in order to eat, right?
Work. Yeah, sure. Work.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are other examples of various means of exploitation based on "fuck you, all the food is mine," right? My answer to that really goes back to a simple concept of what is legitimate property ownership and how do you own natural resources, and the idea of the Lockean concept of homesteading, where you have to mix mix your labor with natural resources to really own them. And you have to do it in an equitable access way, because if you say, I own this entire island, or like a government says, I own this entire territory, your property rights claim is not legitimate in the first place.
Well, what if they gathered all the coconuts on their own?
Right. So if they want to be an asshole and hoard then, and someone wants to say, hey, look, there's two of us on this island, we must have, in order for this to be fair, we must have equitable access to natural resources. So you're taking of all the coconuts. I would challenge that as saying that's not a legitimate property rights claim under what I advocate.
Okay, no, I would agree with that. But the issue there is about coercion. So if you go up to the coconut guy and there's no food on the island, and if you don't do
property rights.
Well, the example, the coconut example, is specifically there for the purpose of like understanding coercion. It's analogous to our system where if you don't work for, let's say, I don't know, McDonald's, then you starve to death. Just like how if you don't suck the guy's dick for coconuts, then you starve to death.
Yeah, a lot of you lefty types want to go to some weird dick sucking places.
That's just Vosh. That's just. Everything with Vosh is like, everything with him is like, okay, let's say hypothetically we're having a threesome, and then like it's always like that for him.
Yeah, no, Vosh, I'll give him, he's got some intellectually entertaining streaks for sure. But no, I think you make it a coercion issue, but it's premised on a false claim to property of all the coconuts. You picked all the coconuts. If you step back and examine it, you did not have a natural rights property claim to all the coconuts on the island, because you had to engage with those natural resources in a way that allowed equitable access to everyone living in that particular area. So I think
that just sounds like communism, though. I mean, if you're going to take if you're going to take a super hardcore capitalist stance on it, then your belief would most capitalists, I would say, would argue that since he took the time and effort and used the labor to acquire those coconuts, and those would be his coconuts, and he can do whatever he pleases.
Most people who call themselves capitalists are fucking morons and don't understand.
I agree. I agree.
Principles. Like they're capitalists because Fox News told them to be capitalists. No. Keep your appeals to authority out of bullshit authority, especially out of here. No, but just because most people would say that, that's not a good argument against what I'm saying. So no, I think a lot of people who identify as capitalists have never examined the issue of what is legitimate property and what is not. And I think it is absolutely critical to understanding capitalism as I define it, as I would say, probably includes you by my definition. And again, I like how we're kind of coming together, and I think we can see that we have similar motivations, that we want a more just and a righteous world. And it's interesting to think that if capitalism requires self-ownership, and it requires the ability to own external property, and it requires the ability to claim that property from nature at some point of origin, whether it's minerals mined or metals or whatever, or trees chopped down or fruit collected, whatever the case may be. Then there is a premise to that most people are missing, which is the equitable access part. And this is really important. I love challenging right wingers and fake capitalists, or I'll say superficial capitalists, right? Victims of propaganda type capitalists. That if I say, look, well, I can own property, right? If it's unclaimed, I can go put up a fence around it. I can homestead it. I can mix my labor with the soil. And if no one else has to claim to that property, pretty much everyone on earth would recognize that an individual human being moving onto unclaimed land, building a home, using natural resources to support themselves and their families, they own that, right?
The only thing I would have an issue with is that it would essentially be if someone came up to your land hungry, starving, with no place to go, and then you decided to make them work for food and resources. As long as you don't turn it into some sort of private capital production scheme, then I don't have an issue with that.
I'll even go a step further in an appeal to lefties here and say that if someone steals from you, you should probably let it go. They probably, if someone steals your food, you have a right to force, because what if I have food that is somehow medically essential for me, and if I don't eat this food, I'm gonna die, right?
I guess it just depends.
Right here, right? Hypothetically, I should be able to kill someone trying to steal that food, but that's not the case 99.99% of the time, and you should let that food go because they need it more, and it's about maximizing value. But that doesn't mean that they have a right to steal it. Although I'm a fan of Edward Abbey and the Monkey Wrench Gang and pointing out, well, hey, fuck you and your illegitimate property rights claims to every major corporation and government in the world today. And if someone wants to come and sabotage that shit or steal that shit back for the people some way, I'm 100% for it. But I want to go back to how I like to challenge the superficial capitalists on the concept of property ownership, because I'll say, okay, so I can put up a fence around 10 acres, as I have in the mountains of Arizona, and you respect that. What if I put it up around 100 acres? What if I put it up around 1 million acres? What if I put a fence around 100 million acres, like the U.S. federal government said, fuck you, we own everything within this? That's not a legitimate property rights claim. But at what point does it become illegitimate? Guess what?
Oh, that's a really hard question, actually. That's actually a really difficult question.
No, it's not. It's not. It's a simple question. It's a simple answer with infinite ways it could go. It's acknowledging the fact, and this is what a lot of this is the ultimate left-right bridge here on economics, because a lot of people on the right don't acknowledge the simple fact that property ownership is a social construct that happens by communal consent.
True.
And that's really important.
I agree. Wait, I'm trying to I don't know. I agree. Based. I guess we don't. Maybe I came in with some assumptions that I shouldn't have coming into this conversation. That's usually the case anytime you talk to anybody. But see, because when I came in here, I was expecting total Ancapistan, fucking McDonald's police kicking down your door. That's usually what you get when you talk to I guess ANCAPs. You probably maybe don't want to use that word, but I got most of my philosophical understanding from Rothbard's Ethics of Liberty, and so I think of ethics first. But I think that the term ANCAP, most people who call themselves ANCAPs aren't really ANCAPs. They're voluntarists, because anarchy and capitalism are two possible outcomes from applying voluntary ethics. And to me, it's the ethics that come first: self-ownership, the non-aggression principle, and it's the two worst terms to describe what we're talking about: anarchy and capitalism, combined into one term, guaranteed to piss off everyone. Rothbard was a terrible messenger, great author, great thinker, but this is why he wasn't ever a successful politician, right? Sure. Wait, do you want to talk about vaccines and COVID?
Yes.
Because I think that might produce some more interesting content.
We've only got a couple minutes, so go ahead.
For sure. Well, I guess the main issue I had, I could pull up our conversation, I guess, but we don't even have to do that probably. The main issue I had was that there are absolutely trusted sources that aren't government affiliated. They're just independent organizations. I mean, like a lot of them they'll occasionally get grants from the government, but
that's part
other
of
than
it.
that,
But here's
I
the
mean,
other
like,
thing is that everyone that has
okay, but then
challenged
you
this
have to
has been censored.
you have to then demonstrate that what they say is incorrect, irrespective of like their connection to the government. If you can't do that, then I don't really care that they have connections to the government. Like,
Okay. So here's my demonstrations then. When we looked at the statistics for COVID deaths when they were around 200,000 in the United States, and the statistic came out that only 6% of those were caused exclusively by COVID.
come on, we all know that
Hold
was
on.
being misused by people on the
No,
right, though. We
it
all
was.
know.
No, a lot of people. Hold on, you're absolutely right. Give me a second here, because a lot of people. Oh, it's only 6%. No. Of the other 94%, now you have to determine how many are legitimate and how many are primary or significant contributing causes of death. And I talked to Dr. Mary Ruwert, who's I forget her actual title, but she likes, but a medical statistical analyst. She's not. It's her doctorate is in. I apologize, but we broke all this down. She's done the greater analysis on the data, and she's someone who I trust to question government appropriately because she has for decades, and really did a great book exposing the FDA's manipulation of the pharmaceutical market and how she proved that it's responsible for tens of millions of deaths over the decades of its existence, and has taken 10 years off the average American's lifespan by putting unapproved or unsafe drugs on the market and keeping safe drugs off the market.
I mean, I would have to see a citation for this. I can't just like.
Come on.
I'm sorry. I can't just trust like what people say on this stuff. Like, come on.
The stats on this are great, but they're also kind of obviously squared with what we know about how the pharmaceutical approval and denial process works in the United States. Think about AIDS drugs. How many life-saving AIDS drugs, if the FDA said, well, you're dying, fuck it, you can experiment with whatever you want. How many lives would have been saved?
What was this person's name again?
Oh, you're dying, but first we have to put this drug through a year of clinical trials, and you can't experiment with it until we approve of it. So it's things like that. But what we did when we looked at that analysis of 200,000, we knew that there were a certain number of false reports in there, and we don't know how many, but we know we can say that there's a range to it. And we know that there's a certain range of deaths where they died with COVID and not at all from COVID, because 98% of cases were asymptomatic. And so it's
what do you think about evidence that shows that COVID is underestimated? Because there's studies that show that they're like at least 20% underestimated.
Yeah, because there are people who are asymptomatic. I believe that's possible.
Wait, but that's COVID. That's COVID deaths. Like the mortality. Like right now, I'm looking at an NCBI study right now that says that it could be anywhere between like 30 and like 100+% underestimated.
Yeah, no, I've seen a lot more evidence and analyses going the other way, and by my judgment, that's a lot closer to the truth. And there's no incentive to say to unscare people. There's a lot of incentive to scare people. And then the other thing is with the vaccine deaths, and this was something Mary Ruwert pointed out, that when you look at VAERS, traditionally, historically, vaccine side effects are underreported by a factor of in between 10 and 100. So when they said it was 5,200, we looked at that, and we looked at some of the broader reports of things that weren't being included in that. And Mary also points out, because she has this intellectual integrity, that she could be wrong in the other direction, that it could only be a multiple of 5 maybe, because they're getting a lot of scrutiny. But we've also seen cases where parents have had children, and there's a significant enough for me at least, body enough of anecdotal evidence that raises suspicion as to these numbers, where we have seen reports, because who has incentive to lie? Government has an incentive to lie. Big pharma has incentive to lie. Politicians
random content random content creators and doctors have incentives to lie too. I mean,
Not
so
to lie
wait,
to
so
get
can I?
attention,
The
but
reason why I'm wait, can I?
that gets rid of the
Can I?
credibility.
Wait, can I speak?
Who doesn't have an incentive to lie? The
Sure.
mothers
Wait, but
of the
then so.
children who
Oh
died
my
after
God.
getting vaccines and told
Oh
their
yeah,
doctors,
did you see that on
please put this in
Facebook?
theirs, and
Did
they
you see
didn't
that on
do it.
Facebook? Oh, my key's gonna stick to my arm. So
No, these
okay,
are
the issue I
individual
have is
reports of
that
actual deaths of people who have died after getting the vaccine, who have tried to get their children's deaths recorded as vaccine related and have been denied.
okay, well
So
then
that's what
I
I
need
look at.
citations and evidence because so
Okay,
I get flashbacks because I have an aunt who I love very much who sends me videos every single day from BitChute that are these like 55-minute long videos where the title is like, the vaccine is going to make 50% of our society infertile. And then you watch the video and it's this like person who claims to be a doctor on like the InfoWars channel. And they're like mulling over a study from 2005 that they can barely read because they're not actually qualified to read this shit.
This way. Come on, you're a smart dude who knows enough to be suspect of government. If government is building this narrative of bullshit and there's a counter narrative, then the people who are maintaining the bullshit narrative have an incentive to infiltrate the community that wants to tell the truth with outlandish people. And I'm not saying Alex Jones is a government plant. I think he's controlled opposition. But they're going to put crazy stories in there to discredit people like me who are just going, well, let's talk to Dr. Mary Ruwart. Let's look at the statistics.
My point is that I don't know anything about this doctor, so I just can't speak to the validity of the things she claims. So I don't know. I could look at her history and find out like a bunch of crazy shit that could discredit her. I don't know.
Yeah, and also in terms of statistics, there's another one that punctures the safety of the vaccine narrative is that in their clinical trials, and I've actually gone and looked at the source data on this from the actual trials, women who were pregnant, I'm reminded by this comment from Healthy
I just read that comment. I'm like, wait, what?
The comment is not good because it's asking for anecdotal evidence. But I would point out that in the clinical trials, there was an increased rate of terminated pregnancies, unintentionally
like
terminated pregnancies. Yeah, from the vaccine in the trials.
I mean, what are the recommendations for the vaccine? Because I think if you're pregnant, you probably shouldn't get vaccinated. That's what I thought.
How can you trust the narrative when they're censoring people who just question it?
Well, what do you mean? Who is censoring? Who is being censored? And who is being censored? And who is it being sent? Who are they being censored by? Specifically in this case, no, I know you got banned, which is terrible. I'm sad for that. But like, if we're talking about like in the scientific community, who is being censored by who and for what?
Oh, there are lots of doctors.
If we're talking about like scholarship,
with Dr. Mary Ruwart was censored on YouTube. Anyway, brother, we're at time. I appreciate the conversation. We're actually over time. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, we should definitely do this again. I'd love to do this again. That'd be really fun.
All right, next time with video, sir.
Can I shill?
The last word.
Can I shill?
Go for it, please.
Okay, everybody, come check me out on Twitch, Noah Earthling. I'm Noah Earthling everywhere, fucking TikTok, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. I'm gonna start doing this like way more. I've been really like slow on streaming just because I'm lazy and a stoner. So you know. But I had a really great time with this conversation. I hope to do this again. I'm gonna turn you all into communists.
Yeah. Right. You mean you're gonna redefine capitalism as communism? Then I'm gonna say yes, I'm a communist because sure, by your definition.
All right, whatever lets you sleep at night. All right, I love
you, sir. With that, love you too, brother. All right, get producer Jim up here for the producer notes to take us home.
Yo, that was fucking awesome. Yeah, that was fucking awesome. That was so good. I think that went really well. I mean, he talked a lot, but it's his show. I can't talk the entire fucking time and like steal the show for him, obviously. So I let him go off a lot. But I think I made my points really well, and I think I spoke well too during that. I'm very happy. I was a little nervous at first, but then I thought about it, and then I got a little bit more comfortable. He's a really fucking nice guy. I feel bad for being mean to him on Twitter. He was really nice. So I definitely want to do this again.